Under the gray chill of a Saturday morning, Riverside Coffee House pressed on with its usual ritual. Steam hissing from overworked machines, boots scraping across tile, and the quiet tension of a town where some people carried too much weight and others carried none at all. At a corner table near the fogged-over window sat Ethan Cross, a single father whose calm presence belied the storm-weathered lines on his face. His faded jacket, worn at the elbows, spoke of years that hadn't been gentle, while the steady way he watched his daughter, Lily, made clear the one part of his life that still held light. The peace fractured when a massive man, broad, loud, and drunk on his own importance, lurched backward into their table, sending a wave of scalding coffee across Ethan's chest. Chairs scrape. Conversations halted. The man sneered down at him, waiting for the room to choose a side. "Move your damn table next time," he barked. Ethan didn't rise, didn't flare, didn't meet force with force. He simply shifted Lily behind him. "You're going to apologize to her," he said, his voice low enough to freeze the air. A silence gathered, thick and electric, as if the cafe itself sensed the line that had just been crossed, leaving one question hanging sharply in the space between them. What happens next? If you want more stories like this, tap like and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. The moment Ethan rose from his chair, the cafe shifted into a strange, suspended quiet. The overhead lights cast a pale glow on the polished floor, and the faint hum of the espresso machine seemed to fade into the distance as though the building was holding its breath. Lily pressed herself against Ethan's back, her fingers curled into the hem of his jacket. She didn't cry. She simply waited, trying to make sense of the ugliness unfolding in front of her. Ethan kept one hand slightly behind him, reassuring her without taking his eyes off the man who had chosen the wrong corner of the room to dominate. Miller stepped forward again, his boots scraping against the tile. "You think you can order me around?" he growled, leaning in as if his shadow could intimidate a man who had walked through real darkness. "You're in my way. Should have stayed home with your coloring books." A couple at a nearby table exchanged uneasy glances, torn between disgust and fear. They knew Miller. Everyone in this district did. He worked at the docks, drank too much, bullied too freely. He was the type who got away with things because no one ever pushed back. His world functioned on the belief that loudness was power and size was authority. Ethan didn't flinch. "You're going to apologize," he repeated, calm but unmovable. It was the voice of a man who didn't need to shout to be heard. His posture remained relaxed, yet there was something about the stillness in him that unsettled even the bystanders who had been silently rooting for drama minutes before. Miller jabbed a finger toward Ethan's chest. "How about I give you one chance to sit down before I embarrass you in front of everyone?" Lily tightened her grip at the sound of the word embarrass. Her small voice finally broke through the tension. "Daddy, can we go home?" Ethan didn't turn to look at her. His focus stayed locked on Miller, but his words were gentle. "We will, sweetheart. In 1 minute." The tenderness in his tone contrasted sharply with the cold assessment in his eyes, a duality that unsettled even the room's most apathetic observers. Instead of stepping back, Miller grabbed the edge of Ethan's chair and yanked it aside, clearing space as if preparing for a spectacle. "Stand up straight when a man talks to you," he barked. "Or are you too soft to?" Ethan moved before the insult could land. Not aggressively, not chaotically, simply with purpose. His hand rose to intercept Miller's arm, redirecting it with a pressure so precise that the bully stumbled forward, thrown off balance by his own momentum. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Chairs scrape. Someone whispered, "Did you see that?" He barely touched him. Ethan's voice returned, steady as bedrock. "Walk away. Last warning." But men like Miller weren't built to recognize mercy. He lunged with a snarling frustration, trying to shove Ethan back. What followed was too fast for most eyes to track. Ethan sidestepped, guided Miller's wrist downward, and shifted his weight. The maneuver wasn't violent. It wasn't even dramatic. It was simply correct. So correct that Miller's body spun out of its own coordination and crashed onto the floor with a heavy, humiliating thud. His breath punched out of him in a sharp wheeze that echoed off the cafe walls. Lily startled at the noise, but Ethan remained her unshakable anchor, shielding her view with a slight turn of his torso. Miller lay stunned for a moment, blinking as though the world had betrayed him. The humiliation hit him harder than the fall. You tripped me," he roared, scrambling to his elbows. "No," a barista whispered under her breath, eyes wide. "He dismantled you." Miller staggered back to his feet, red-faced, his pride bleeding faster than any injury. He swung a clumsy punch, wild, telegraphed, fueled by anger instead of skill. Ethan stepped aside with a fluidity that seemed almost unfair. His hand tapped Miller's shoulder, redirecting him again, and the bully slammed into a table, knocking over plates and sending forks clattering to the tile. The cafe erupted in scattered cries and hurried retreats. Ethan never lifted a fist. He didn't need to. But Miller's rage had blinded him. He reached for a heavy ceramic mug as if it could restore the power slipping through his fingers. "I'm gonna break. Stop." Ethan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Precise. Unquestionable. For the first time, Miller hesitated, not because he wanted to, but because something in Ethan's tone awakened a primal understanding. He was outmatched in every possible way. Still, pride twisted his expression. "You don't scare me," he spat. "You're not meant to be scared," Ethan answered. "You're meant to understand." Before Miller could respond, a customer shouted from across the room, "Put the mug down, man. You're acting insane." Another added, "Leave them alone." The tide was turning, and Miller felt it. The room that once tolerated him was starting to see him for what he was. But humiliation breeds recklessness. With a desperate swing, Miller hurled the mug toward Ethan. The object arced through the air, straight toward Lily. Ethan caught it. Not with panic. Not with fury. Just a clean, controlled interception that froze the cafe in stunned silence. Lily let out a tiny gasp. Ethan set the mug on the counter beside him, never breaking eye contact with a man who had crossed a line no parent could forgive. "You're done," Ethan said, not as a threat but as a judgment. At that moment, the cafe door burst open as two police officers rushed inside. Customers pointed at Miller, voices overlapping, recounting everything the bully had done. One officer approached Ethan, but the other immediately handcuffed Miller, who sputtered a frantic mix of excuses and accusations. "He attacked me," Miller shouted. "He threw me on the ground." A waitress stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "That's a lie. You spilled coffee on him, mocked his daughter, tried to hit him, threw a mug. Everything that happened is on you." Others chimed in, emboldened. The officers didn't hesitate. Miller was dragged to his feet, shouting protests that no one believed. The same room that once avoided confronting him now stood united in exposing him. His downfall wasn't just public, it was absolute. As he was escorted toward the exit, Miller locked eyes with Ethan, hatred simmering beneath his humiliation. "This isn't over," he hissed. Ethan didn't react. "It is," he replied, and the finality in his voice left no room for dispute. Outside the cafe windows, Miller was shoved into the police car, his rage crashing against the reality that there were consequences. Real ones, for the first time in a long time. The townspeople watched as the car pulled away, a collective exhale rippling through the space he once poisoned. Inside, Lily peeked around her father's side. "Daddy. Is he going to hurt anyone else?" Ethan knelt so she could see his eyes clearly. "No," he said gently. "Not anymore." The cafe workers gathered around, apologizing, thanking him, expressing the guilt of not speaking sooner. Ethan shook his head each time. "Just take care of each other," he told them. "That's all that matters." But the room wasn't done with him yet. The young barista who had witnessed everything approached hesitantly. "Sure. I just wanted to say, you changed something today." Ethan didn't answer. He simply guided Lily to the table where her drawing still waited, one sunbeam, one tree, and a half-finished sky untouched by cruelty. The cafe slowly returned to life. Conversations soft but hopeful. People glanced toward Ethan with newfound respect, not because he fought, but because he refused to let darkness write the story of their morning. And as he tucked Lily's coat around her shoulders and gathered their things, a quiet certainty settled over the room. The man who tried to break others had finally broken himself, under the weight of his own actions. Ethan walked Lily toward the exit, her hand wrapped safely in his, while whispers followed them like a gentle current. Yet the real question lingered, sharp and pulsing beneath the surface. What comes next when a town finally stands up to the man who once ruled it through fear? The days that followed carried a quieter rhythm through the town, as though the cafe incident had shaken something loose in the people who witnessed it. Ethan continued his routines, school drop-offs, evening walks by the river, weekend breakfasts with Lily, but there was a new steadiness in him, a sense that the world around them had shifted in a small but undeniable way. He hadn't set out to change anything. He only wanted to protect the little girl who trusted him without hesitation. Yet the community now greeted him with nods marked by a deeper understanding, as if they had finally learned to recognize the kind of strength that doesn't demand attention. Lily, too, seemed different. She no longer shrank when someone raised their voice in the cafe. Instead, she watched her father with a quiet pride, realizing that courage wasn't loud and didn't need to be cruel. Ethan never spoke about what happened, but she felt the truth in the way he held her hand. Steady, warm, unwavering. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the riverbanks, Ethan paused on their porch, watching Lily color the sky in her sketchbook. The drawing was simple, but the light in her eyes carried something new. The belief that kindness could still shape a world that sometimes felt unsteady. Ethan understood then that the real victory wasn't in restraining a bully. It was in giving his daughter proof that dignity doesn't have to bow to intimidation. A breeze lifted the edge of her page, scattering a soft rustle across the quiet yard. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment and let the calm settle. Some battles were loud. Others were won in silence. This one, he realized, belonged to both. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to help Canada's Heartfelt Tales continue bringing powerful stories to life.